Hey there, YouTube. This is Ridley Prime. Uh, this may seem kind of sudden, I guess, since I haven't really bothered to do anything notable with my channel in years, but this was, I felt, a special occasion to publicly contribute to Metroid's 30th anniversary. Like, normally it's not something I would bother with during like the previous anniversaries like the 25th, but since the series has been in a poor state for a while, I thought it more necessary than ever for people like myself to do contributions to the anniversaries like this, whether it's a video like this or do some kind of fan art or anything. But anyway, here I'll just do like a kind of retrospect series overview. Like I'll kind of briefly go over each game while showcasing like my copies of them or things related to the games, as well as like non-game Metroid material I might have on me. But and I guess discuss where the whole series will possibly go in the future. Anyway, to start off, Metroid 1. I don't have a physical copy of it on me to show off, but like for where the series started with like the 8-bit era, it was pretty solid. Like the password system is one of the things I definitely miss from it. Like I get why they wouldn't have it anymore, since like the save features and save stations in later games would naturally render it obsolete, but like the cheat codes you could have with it, like the ones like pretty much everyone knows, like Justin Bailey and Narpass Sword Zero, I think it was. It just kind of offered a unique kind of replayability to the game. And for me, and I think for pretty much most who played it, regardless of the time that they started doing so, I think the hardest part of the game was easily just the platforming, not so much the bosses or enemies. Like in Norfair, if you fall into a certain lava pit, pretty tough to get out. You have to pretty much time your jumps perfectly just to escape the little lava pit that you may have fallen out of. Same with like escaping Turin after you beat Mother Brain on your way out. All those little platforms you gotta hop on. I know I died the first few or couple of times on that part more than the boss itself. But moving on, Metroid 2. I'd gotten a Game Boy back in the day, but that was one of the games I never ended up getting on there, sadly, so I didn't get to play it until it became available on the 3DS Virtual Console years and years later. But like, it was definitely a unique Metroid experience. Like, probably one of the first, I guess, non-linear games, since you didn't have to go to a specific area in a specific order. You just had to go here and there to eliminate all the different kind of Metroids in whatever order, whether it was the base larva, I think the Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega type Metroids. The Zeta ones were definitely engaging. Same with the Omega, which I definitely got more an impression out of fighting them on that game than I did with the Omega Metroid you would see at the very end of Fusion. Moving on, Super Metroid. This was personally my first game of the series when I had first like gotten the SNES in the mid-90s or so, and it came with my system. Sadly, I don't have the box cover or just the game box on me anymore. Either just got crushed or lost somewhere over time. Same with like the official Nintendo's Player's Guide I had gotten for it at one point. But yeah, like with most fans, this remains one of my favorite cherished entries in the franchise for pretty similar reasons. Just for all the elements, power-ups, just all the new kind of things that add to the gameplay that have carried on over every other game after this since. You know, there's a whole lot I could say about this, could go on all day about this, but I want to keep this video contribution under minimum long, so I'll just move on to the next game. Metroid Prime. Perhaps arguably my favorite game, perhaps even more than Super Metroid. It's kind of apples and oranges as far as comparing the two for most, but like, I guess for me, this and the Prime trilogy just kind of aged better overall. Like, kind of makes me thankful, ironically, that this didn't debut during the N64 era, and it would have really aged bad like a lot of games on that system. But like, just the new things it introduced, you know, like all the unique first-person aspects, the scan visor, the different type of visors with this and the sequels, the morph ball segments were kind of unique 3D platforming too when you go in third person. And this was around when I first started getting into, like, you know, the kind of shooter games that were like lore heavy. Like, you didn't see much as far as the lore, the story. You didn't see much as far as, you know, like the cutscenes or anything. You just had to like read into like the log entries, audio logs, or such and such to really follow the story, the lore of the game, which still to this day is I feel is a unique way of storytelling compared to just showing everything that happens in the story in a cutscene. But yeah, this also had some of my favorite environments in the series, like the Vendrana Drifts, Town Overworld, even though that's very similar to like Super Metroid's Criteria, I believe it was called. Magmore Caverns was pretty much a remixed Norfair. But I guess just how much this took a page from Super Metroid as far as the environments kind of added to my fondness for it. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Definitely still like the little holographic effect to the front and back cover of this game box. For most fans, it was either like, I think either the second or the third Prime that was kind of like the black sheep of the trilogy for them. For me, it would probably be this, like my least favorite. Although, looking back, I think I was a lot more harsh on it than I should have been. Like, still a great game. Definitely better than I remembered when I went back replaying it when I had gotten the whole Prime trilogy on the Wii U's Virtual Console. But the whole dimension hopping between the light and dark worlds and just the whole dark and light theme of the game overall just didn't do it for me. Although the Ing were definitely unique creatures. And the Luminoth, I guess they were okay too, even though they didn't have the same kind of charm for me that the Chozo did. But the split screen multiplayer, I didn't really care much for, since by that time those kind of multiplayers had kind of ran their course for me. Although, even though now I kind of like miss those days of couch split screen gaming, which have become more and more diminished from by the age of online gaming. While still on the subject of this game, I do still have the Nintendo Player's Guide for it. I think this might have been one of the one I bought for 10 to 15 bucks back in the day. Either that or it's one of the ones that came free with my Nintendo Power subscription at the time. But a lot of these guides, it was back before guides online from the internet, like game FAQs and stuff, became more and more prominent. Like they easily render game guidebooks like this obsolete today, but back then, aside from using them, like in Metroid's case, to look for all the mystical expansions and things to 100% the games, I just liked having them for collector's purposes, and some of them, especially the guides for the older games, offered some unique artwork and in the content of their pages. Not so much for this guide. It's pretty much all like in-game screenshots for what they show with the guide, like how to find this and that, how to progress. But it's still something to treasure for a nostalgia factor, I guess. Same goes for like still owning all these copies of the old Nintendo Powers, even though I eventually gave like most of those away to save up room and space. Next up we have Metroid Prime 3 Corruption. The Japanese box art for this easily puts this here to shame. Like anyone who's seen it, they know what I'm talking about. But this was when this entry in the series, I guess, was the point when the series became more, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarized. Especially this game here, which had been, often criticized for being too easy with the whole hyper phase-out mode through the game, making you feel like a god pretty much, and then there was the whole hand-holding with the Aurora unit and people telling you where to go and stuff. But in spite of all that, I really enjoyed it. It was my second favorite of the trilogy. It's more linear, like Fusion and that one other game that we'll eventually get to, but since this was introduced at a time when motion controls were still pretty new with Nintendo and the Wii, I still got a fresh experience out of it, and was still worth the investment, I feel, despite the lack of replayability of it for others, whether it's due to more lack of sequence breaking or some such. The player's guidebook for it I still happen to have on my person as well. Again, this is pretty much another one of the guidebooks that pretty much just shows a bunch of in-game screenshots, or just renders of characters you would see anywhere online. But there's still some enjoyment to be had for still having this book for same reasons as others, I guess. Oh, I had a poster here in the back, which I never really felt bothered to use, but yeah. Next, we have Metroid Prime Hunters for DS. Still have like the first hunt demo, and like the box for Echoes, it has that unique, or that neat little holographic effect to it. This is definitely another one of those polarized games. Like, it definitely introduced a lot of new fans to the series with its multiplayer features. But for me, like, online play still hadn't really caught on for me at the time. So when I got it, I pretty much just got it for this single player, like I would with any other game in the series. And looking back, it definitely, I don't think was anywhere bad as most people said. Although, even though it wasn't like as long as people would have liked for like a prime game on a portable system, but it definitely helped expand the lore. The lore in a lot of ways that other games didn't. Like, for some, this may be their favorite for different reasons, whether it was their memories for the multiplayer or because certain other hunters became their one of their favorites. Usually for most it's like Psylocke, since he's one of the only ones that have, still been had a following to this day. I guess it helped that he had a cameo in like Prime 3's 100% ending, and has still been hinted at occasionally for like a future game. But like personally, I was more of a Weevil kind of guy, just on the verdict that he was a cybernetic space pirate like Meta Ridley. But the first hunt demo, I remember some people used to say or argue that it was better than the final product just because it had Metroids in it, but it's, looking back, that was kind of a silly argument, since you shouldn't always have to have the same enemies, same power-ups, etc. for every game. It's good to always have something new, fresh every now and then, even if it doesn't have Metroids or the things you're most familiar with. And yeah, this was another one of the guides I still happen to have found, and looking back, I think this was pretty much one of the ones I'd gotten for collector's purposes, not so much for figuring out how to beat the game or find all the scan visor collectibles, but like, yeah, it did offer, the locations for all that, and pretty much everything else was just showing strategies for the multiplayer maps. But I thought it was kind of good having for collector's purposes. Okay, next, I guess we'll move on to the Game Boy Advance titles. Zero Mission. Since I still have the game box on me, I'll just comment on a little. I definitely love like the Chozo Ruins aspects of the front cover here, or Chozo Dia, or Chozo Dia as it was called, the the location was called in the game. And of course you had the shadowy red figure of Ridley lurking here at the top, and the side hoppers and those other familiar little critters. And good old plot synopsis here, and in-game screenshot of Kraid and Samus and her ship. And yep, still have the guide for this as well. This was one of the ones that had unique artwork, like this little image of the Chozo statue here. What else? Here's Samus and one of the giant side hoppers. These little comic book kind of art that they were just kind of like short little horizontal panels somewhere in between the guide pages, like not really part of any official comic, but you know, for what this is, like here it has that whoosh sound effect. These were definitely unique artistic ways of making these game guides. Like here's another one. Boom. Oh, here's that Ridley render. Definitely would not have minded if he looked more like this in-game somewhere. Well, like in Zero Mission, he's like more brown in-game. Ah, yes, the Metroid ones. Boom. That reminds me, while still on the subject of Zero Mission, I guess I'd kind of like to briefly go over the Zero Mission manga. Its canonicity, whether it's canon or not, has always been hugely debatable. Like, just because of how different the Metroid universe is shown in it, how different it is from how it is shown in the games. Like, the Galactic Federation, for instance, has a lot more alien members, ambassadors, peace ambassadors, and things there, whereas like in the games, the Federation is pretty much composed of all humans, and just all those other kind of differences. But it fit perfectly in the timeline, and the things that showed like why the Chozo created Metroids to combat the discovered X-parasites, the prequel to Samus's first mission before she became a bounty hunter, showed her acquiring the Chozo DNA that was given to her, showed her in training. Like if you recall, there was those in Zero Mission, oh yeah, and in Super Metroid 2, the little wreck ship, there was those little R2-D2 kind of looking robots. They were in the wreck ship in Super Metroid, and the space pirate mothership in Zero Mission. But yeah, in the manga, like it showed Samus using those, the Chozo giving her those as like practice targets, dummies. It's kind of interesting since like years later, the wreck ship in Super Metroid was revealed to be an ancient Chozo ship. And, well, I guess it may have been obvious to some since the description for it was like a wrecked ship by an ancient race or something like that. And usually the first thing that comes to mind with as far as that in the series is the Chozo. But yeah, back to the manga. It's a shame it never got officially localized and reached like Western shores. Because if it had been, I definitely would have bought a physical copy of it. But I remember at one point on like one of the official Metroid websites, Nintendo had kind of advertised it on there, like showing that they intended that to be part of the story. And like the first couple volumes of it were like put in color. It was either by them or like Metroid Database or something. I forget now, but like the rest of the manga, although only in black and white, and you have to read from it from right to left instead of left to right, you can still find the rest of it like English translated on Metroid Database and a bunch of sites. Still worth looking into. It was really well written, like the characterization of Samus and everything, and with one of the next games I guess I'll have to cover, I'll go a bit more into that too. Let's see, what do we got next here? Oh yes, Metroid Fusion. This was like the first real linear game of this series, so it was kind of a black sheep for people as far as the side scrollers. But me personally, it was probably my second favorite of the side scrollers, aside from Super Metroid. Like, despite the linearity, it was still one of my favorites to like replay, whether it was like speed running, like whether it was doing 100% speed run. I remember I used to have pretty good records of that, like somewhere under 2 hours beating the game and speed run while having 100%. I also like doing like a low percent run through where you skip everything except for like one unavoidable missile tank. And although I think the farthest I got as far as doing that was like against the spider boss. I believe he was called Yakuza. Yeah, the name is based on like those kind of mafia gangs. But it also was one of the first like kind of scary in a way games, because you know you were underpowered for most of the game, having to run and hide from the doppelganger called the SAX, or as some call him, the Sax. Although looking back, his AI was laughably bad, but just the whole concept and idea of having to run and hide from him or it, and stronger enemies, like when you were in Chozo Daya and Zero Mission, when you only had the Zero suit, had to run and stun and run from space pirates and things. I kind of miss those aspects that were only in the Game Boy Advance games, and definitely wouldn't mind seeing them back again, like in a future game, even though the whole concept of losing your power-ups has kind of been done to death, but it can still offer unique, fresh experiences if done right. Metroid Prime Pinball. Since this is just like a spin-off, I know it's something like least amount of fans have really gotten to experience or play hands-on because they may have just not cared for it because it was a pinball game, or just on principle of it being that kind of spin-off. But for what it was, I thought it was pretty fun. Like, I loved how they did like pinball tables of pretty much all the main areas of Metroid Prime, minus like the Chozo ruins, but everywhere else they had a pinball table. And since most fans I've known haven't really got to play or experience it hands-on, I'll just show a little bit of the gameplay here on my regular 3DS. Always tricky to show yourself playing a DS or 3DS game on webcam here. Let's see. Pirate Frigate had some interesting Metroid Metal sounding music. Talon Overworld was kind of self-explanatory. Phendrana Drifts, you fought the animated rock creature Thardus. Phazon Mines, there is the Omega Pirate. Artifact Temple, you face Meta Ridley. You have to like keep an eye and control all these Chozo artifact pinballs, which you have to like shoot into like the totems. And then you would have like the Impact Crater, where you fight both of the Metroid Prime creatures' forms. It's a shame this never got a sequel, because I would have liked seeing how they would have done like a Metroid Prime 2 or 3 version of this, especially with like what the Boost Guardian and Echoes, and like some of the Dark Samus encounters had her using her own more potent version of the Boost Ball. It would have been interesting to see how it translated in a pinball game here. But anyway, I guess I'll briefly go try the Artifact Temple here. This was probably the hardest pinball table in the game for me and pretty much anyone I know who's played it. So I'm expecting to lose all my lives here. Yeah, that really like drops his little bombs on your artifact balls, blowing them to bits. But if you get them all in totems, he'll just fly away. You don't really see him die anything in game here like you do in the real Prime. Well, this is going lasting longer than I thought. Apologies if you can't really see much that clearly, but I'm just doing what I can here to show. Yeah, That went about as expected. Oh no, I didn't mean to retry that. While I'm still here on the game, I'll try the Omega Pirate Phazon Mines. Definitely wouldn't have minded if this guide came back, or a different version of this guide came back in Prime 3. I always thought he was cooler than like the Berserker Lord Phazon Pirates that they had in that game. Yep, there's Space Pirates and Omega here. Watch out for. Yeah, it's his boss theme music from Prime. One of the pirates there blocked Omega from being damaged by me. Goes to show how rusty I am at this. I guess lastly I'll just try Phendrana Drifts real quick. Little Triclops here at the bottom screen are probably more problematic than Thardos himself. Force field. Sounds about right. And lastly, well, let me turn this off first. And lastly, out of the collection, the one I haven't been looking forward to going over, Other M. You really have to be careful what you say about this game, whether it's around people who like it or loathe it, but where to begin on this mess? Well, the critiquing and criticizing of it has been done to death, along with like picking it apart and invalidating everything about the game. Right. As a game itself, looking past all the questionably written parts of the story, I still liked it as far as the gameplay, despite the those weird little pixel hunts you had to do, and the lack of nunchuck with the Wiimote. You pretty much just had to use the Wiimote horizontally. Like, I get why others hated it, but I kind of liked it 'cause it brought back memories of the feel of playing the side scrollers with like the D-pad, even though it was kind of weird using it to control Samus around in a 3D environment. I guess just to go over some of the gameplay aspects of it, I liked. Definitely loved how the ice beam was more pivotal, pivotal and essential in like against certain enemies and boss fights, and definitely wouldn't mind the ice beam having more of a role like that in future games. There was also from what I recall, the Accel charge or accelerated charge, like these little mini power-ups you could get for the charge beam, where you could charge your beam faster than you could before. That's something I wouldn't mind returning also. But the other things, like the collectibles, like looking for missile expansions and stuff to 100%, that was pretty bare bones, since I guess they didn't feel the need to include as many of those, since you could like refill your health. Yeah, energy tanks and missile expansions. I guess they didn't feel the need to include as many of those, since you could refill both with like the concentration gameplay mechanic. And yeah. There's, as far as the story itself, some parts of it I like, some parts I kind of feel the same way as others do, but for a game that I like playing through, there were good merits I found, like with any game. Like, people typically like to blame this for why the fan base or fandom became divided, but truthfully, the fan base was divided even before this stinker came along. Like, there's the portion of the fan base who only like the side scrollers, and then there's the people who pretty much only like the Primes games, the first person. But I guess people who like the side scrollers would like this better than the Primes, just from the gameplay perspective, since it was more similar. Like the sense of like the power ups, like unlike the Primes, it had the speed booster. The plasma beam was all green, like in the side scrollers. It wasn't all fiery lava like in the Prime games, and it's just overall more similar to the side scrollers as far as those kind of aspects. But yeah, the worst parts of the story sadly aren't that defendable, especially when the director, creator himself, Sakamoto, came out and said at one point, like, well, clearly the story wasn't the problem with the game because I wrote it. Someone's ego was showing there, but it is sad that the reception for this game, which for the most part I guess wasn't unwarranted, it led to the second drought the series has had, the first being during the 64 era, because like Super Metroid was originally intended to be the last game. It wasn't until like a couple of gens later where enough fandom man resulted in its return with like the Prime infusion. But as far as what else was I going to say about this sucker? Oh yeah, the manga. The game definitely implemented a lot of parts, features from the manga, which was kind of a flaw, since like the manga is as good as it is, it's obscure. It's still obscure for like most fans. Like a lot of fans who may have or would not have known of its existence if not for this game. Like they see certain scenes, why is this happening? And then they see, oh, because it once happened in the manga. But I hate when certain fans like lump the manga with this, when like Sakamoto was, I think he was kind of involved with the manga in some way. I forget in what aspect, but I know he wasn't the one who like wrote the story for it. Because like if he was, like you would have seen a lot more similarity with the manga in this. Like in the manga, Samus was like a lot more defiant towards Adam when she first met her, commanding officer, whereas here it was a lot more submissive, I guess. I really don't want to get into the whole politics as to the assassination of Samus's character, but yeah, like her characterization and everything in the manga, as well as the other characters, was done much better in the manga. And despite the first impressions others might have gotten of it from this game, I would still say it's worth checking out, even though there's some parts of it you could like easily disregard to the lore, like Samus's two sidekicks. I forget their name, but you don't see them anywhere else. Well, like the important parts of notable parts of it can fit perfectly within the timeline as far as a canon part of Samus's story. But yeah, it's kind of sad that like this and Fusion were the only games where she got to have a personality. Speaking of which, I feel her characterization in Fusion was done much better as well, even though like others may not be able to see that game the same way again, since this kind of bridged the gap between Super and Fusion. But I really liked her personality in Fusion, especially in like the epilogue. Even though it was kind of the beginning of the whole blabby, over talkative monologue Samus, but the problem with her and Other N was like the whole monotone feel of her voice. Like I don't fault the voice actress Jessica Martin for that, but just the overall direction of the game. But I know she's capable of better. Like she's been like in episodes of Doctor Who and things like that. I think that's about all I should say on this game. I am an occasional artist since it's been part of the territory with one of my previous majors or attempts at majoring in something. Like I did this drawing here of Ridley. It was taken off of this Pacific pose or stance he had in one of these panels of the Metroid manga. I'd also at one point, it was back in like 2011 during like Metroid's 25th anniversary, off of eBay. I had ordered this fan-made figure of Ridley, which you kind of wouldn't see anywhere else. I kind of got in part because I remember it was cheaper than like the first four figures that was like officially made under corporate contract. But this artist kind of made these on his own independently and to like mass produce with the materials he had and recreated them for sale. He did ones not just for Ridley here, but like some other Metroid characters as well as some Zelda characters and things. His name was his username went by Happiness Figures. I hadn't really seen what he's been up to in a while, since like the last time I checked to see what he's been up to, he kind of made himself more scarce. But I hope he's been doing all right with like the business he was trying to have, or whatever he's doing in life now, I guess. But yeah, I guess I'll show the Ridley figure I got here real quick just to do a little quick overview of it. I had actually gotten two, since like the first one I had ordered, the left wing of it sadly got broken off during shipment, and it wasn't like a clean enough cut for me to permanently glue back together. Like, I tried gluing it a couple of times, but eventually the glue I had for like the wing kind of wore off. But yeah, this is the first one, the one with the broken wing. Yeah. I really do like the paint style variation of this. Like, it's based on like the Super Metroid design, the Super Metroid render, like the pose he has in it. Like, artists really did a really good job on pretty much, yeah, like all of it. Well, I guess on this copy, for some reason, this toe is painted black instead of white, but just like, you know, the textures of this figure, like the feet, talons, or whatever you call them, the bumpy structures of the tail, the spiky parts of his back, just the wing textures, and the, you know, the overall head shape, the neck, oh, that little tongue. Yeah. Next I'll show my other one that's like more complete, so to speak. Yeah. Here's the one that isn't broken. Both versions came with this little stand thing, but I thought it was kind of too small, flimsy. I always feared he might fall over or something if I just left him like this, but so I kind of had this like little wooden stand made, kind of spray painted it gold to like put the little nail that has him attached in here. And normally I have it like behind a glass case alongside these other figures downstairs where I game and use my computer and stuff, so my cat and other people won't mess with it or anything. And with my second figure shipment, I had gotten this little card signed by the artist himself. Like, this was what, like the 5th out of 50 he had made, signed his artist name, 2011. You know, like, this was way back before like amiibos were even first thought of as a concept. But I'd still definitely be open to the idea of a Ridley amiibo happening one day. One of my other things I'd like to do someday is maybe cosplay too, but from what I've seen of Ridley cosplays, the wings and tail and things you have to drag along with how hot it must be in that kind of cosplay costume, I imagine. I'm not sure that's something I'd ever want to put myself through, but yeah. I guess all that's left is the future. Yeah, there's Federation Force. The whole environment that the discussion for that game has created has gotten really depressing. Like, with the haters on the game, like, you know, people that have made angry, knee-jerk reactions and rants to the game. I've done that myself. I'm not going to act like I'm innocent from any of that. and just, you know, the people defending the game in general. Like, I know some like to use like Metroid Prime Pinball here to defend the game as a spin-off, but this came out when Metroid was still getting plenty of games. A spin-off, ideally, would be there to complement a thriving series, not, you know, be the only thing to keep it afloat. You know, just like the general overall art style and pretty much everything about the game just doesn't really appeal or interest me. Like, if it actually turns out good, then I'll be glad for the people who enjoy that. Like, I might consider getting it somewhere down the line if it's used, or get a used copy or something, but definitely not something I'd ever be in a hurry for. Like, for me, it's pretty much just Metroid in name only. It couldn't be further from a Metroid game, even by spin-off standards. Like, it's not that I or fans not really happy with it are against change. Change is good, but there's only so far you can go with change before, like, you know, a series kind of loses its identity completely. And the isolation, all those other elements that people would normally like about Metroid, it's not there with Federation Force. Not that I can't or haven't enjoyed multiplayer co-op games or shooters, but I don't know. There are the people who say give it a chance, play it first before you have an opinion before you form an opinion on it. But the whole point of trailers is to, like, decide for yourself whether you're interested in the product that the trailer is showing or not. And so far, the trailers have not done that for me. Like, I guess not. This was shown not too long ago. I guess not to too much surprise. The game has amiibo support where you can, like, use Samus amiibos to, like, make Federation troopers have, like, a Samus power suit paint job to their armor. Although I personally found that kind of distasteful for, like, the Samus and Metroid fans who want, like, another real entry. But I'm kind of done crapping on the game itself. Like, I'll wait to see how it's received when the game is actually out, and then decide for myself if it's worth getting at some point or not. But it's just that Nintendo's kind of come at a point where they're die-hard fans, like the die-hard fans of their franchises, especially like the lesser selling ones or utilized ones like Metroid, are no longer enough to keep them afloat. So they have to find new, different ways to draw people into these series, and that's pretty much what they're doing with Federation Force. Even though I find it kind of a shame that our beloved Metroid was kind of hit in the crossfire of this series franchise tampering. But the truth of the matter is, these are uncertain times for a lot of franchises, not just Metroid or certain Nintendo series, but hopefully maybe Metroid will see the light of day again on the NX. I wasn't really expecting it on the Wii U. I know there may have been some attempts to have it on there, but they kind of abstained from it, which may have been for the best, since a Metroid on there would not have really sold on a system that's been selling that lousy. Although granted, the GameCube was a failing system compared to its, like, competitors, but in spite of that, like, the first Prime still managed to be the highest grossing Metroid overall, so maybe there is more potential in sales for the series than others have been letting on for it. Who knows? But yeah, I hope that I hope that Federation Force proves to be a blessing in disguise, paves the way for like a more traditional game down the line, which I guess its story would connect to with like Silux or something. For like a Prime 4, well, I doubt it would be called Prime 4, or maybe it would, just for the sake of brand recognition, but I think anything, I guess it could have Prime in the title, but it probably shouldn't be like a numerical title like Prime 4, because I think it, because, you know, that would mean, that would no longer mean that Prime was a trilogy, you know, like, call it Prime something else, like how you have Prime Federation Force. But yeah, I'll eagerly await that traditional game, whether it's Prime something with Silux or another side-scroller attempt. Like a 2.5D one would be nice and preferable. I've also considered like the fan remakes of certain games, like the recently nearly completed, or maybe it's completed now, it's referred to as AM2R, the Metroid 2 remake. It's non-profit fan-made. Can only hope that Nintendo doesn't see the need to pull the plug on it like they have with other fan-made works, especially when they've been doing nothing for Metroid's anniversaries, aside from maybe occasionally showing something for Federation Force, but yeah, I think that's about it. For anyone who knows or has known me, I hope you enjoyed seeing this video, what I had to show, and what I had to talk about for each of the games in the future. And if you have any suggestions for what I can maybe do with this channel in the future, let me know in the comments and things, and I might maybe one day make a name for myself on here, even though it's something I had never really been planned or been eager to do. But anyway, happy 30th anniversary, Metroid fans and everyone, and hope you all have a good rest of the month, year for it, and see you next mission, I guess. Peace.